Now in clextra we have a 13 character code for all locations, which is linked to geographies. It's linked to Google Maps. Uh, so it's GIS, GPS based locator, which is linked everywhere. So the key word there is we use the word store. Internally, we use the word as a store. It's just a point, a touch point on a map in a geographical sense. So the store can be an office location, it can be a factory, it can be a bus depot, it can be a workshop. So any point across the platform, across Clextra, has a 13 character code. You can name it what you want, you can group it what you want. So what you're seeing on screen is one example of that. So this 13 character code which you see here has 30 broadly it is as described there, but you have options of 7 sets of options. For example, if you could use this for the US office as we have said here, but there could be a simpler way for using in the United States, because you could use default set 6. Currently the default set, what we call the parameter here, is DDM-CCL parameter. The DDM-CCL parameter is set to 0, so the default is 0. So I'll explain a little bit more when the default is 0. But if I choose default 6, if the DDM-CCL parameter is 6, then those 13 characters become these. So the first two would be the US, the next two would be the state in the US, United States, and then there's a 5 character zip code, and you'd have the 4-bit area code, which is uh, provided widely across the US. So this will identify and locate to a few square meters or any specific point on a geography. We can link this back to our own set of maps, to Google Maps, to coordinates, to GPS systems, to GIS systems. So the default here, if you put it to 6, you'd have to make store IDs like this. There are other options, like we've done for the Indian Railways. So levels, there's a 7, there is 5 type of grouping. So the 13 characters can be grouped in various ways. Almost definitely the first two is the country and the next two is the state. And most often we follow ISO codes or the postal services codes. So by default, if you look at it, if it's a 0, the default 0 code is, in which case the first two characters is small letters, the country code, and the next two letters is in capital letters, the state of that country within that country. And then the next three is allowed for the city. So if it's a city or town, then you have a 3 character code. And then the next 4 characters, it could we have this is a layer concept. The first is always an alphabet. A to Z is always an alphabet, and by default, the next three is ZON. So it's always an alphabet, A to Z, and then the next 3 letters are ZON for zone. And then the next 2 characters can be a running number. Typically, we visualize that as being as part of the floors. It could be if you have a 6-story building, then the 6th floor would be 06, and so on and so forth. So that's the way you could look at the number. So that's arbitrary, it's a running number. The area is also envisaged in another format. If you can see that going down, it could be if you look in set 2, the PPP here, or the VTC code in this format. Then what happens with these is you could also have divide your map into 3 by 3 zones. That's north, south, east, and west, and a central, and further divide that into 3. So you get 81, a matrix of 81 by 81, and you could have a north by northwest, east. So you could have a very complicated, which is postal beats. If you're doing food delivery and other services, e-commerce deliveries, you may want that kind of granularity. But otherwise, we keep this as a default as A001. So by default, remember, so I'm in Bangalore. So by default, it would be India, IN, Karnataka, which is KA, and then the 3 is for Bangalore. So this has been defined for cities. So Mysore, Pune, or any other Maharashtra would be MHPUN, and so on and so forth. And the A is layering. So when we go into why we need that layering, A, B, C, D is if we are going to do IoT services or layers, these are vertical layers on top of the map. So we could have process layers or other layers on the physical layout. So by default, that is A. You can also leave Z01 by default. So if you're starting a new one, it's fairly simple. You would start a new character code. So let me explain that to you. So if I was going to create a location, by default, I would say N, Karnataka, and then I could type, say, so let's say I was doing Dharwad, and it would be by default, I'll use AZON, and I would add 04 or whatever I wanted number after that. So this would create a location. Once I've created this location, then you can go ahead and edit that. So let me put that in, let me continue that, let's say the same default. So now I go back and edit that information. It'll appear. So this was our plan. Our plan was that we would set up this new thing that we have. So this is a new store name. So we have to edit the store name which you see on top, which is by default added there. So now I edit this and I can change the store name, which is the master information for this. So let's say I add Dharwad uh, bus workshop. Okay, and I could also have the description. So these are the main key fields, and I can support this by further saying this is uh, just Dharwad bus workshop. So that's the main thing. So the internal code store number is 10. So internally it's stored as 10. Don't touch anything else. So mainly these two. And then the rest will be as needed. So these are the two key fields we have. Later on, you can add the address of the location. There's a lot of tax related information, key persons at that location. So whatever is relevant to your application, you can add those later. So the key things is now to be able to describe it. So now having described it, I store this, and now if I look at the locations list, the thing has been added. You can see that the Dharwad workshop has been added. It's in Karnataka, Dharwad. AZ04 has been added. Now I can view more information about that, and I can edit it. So this is how you would be able to create a location or a store. So quick summary of that again. So you must set your DDM CCL parameters. It's usually done one time, first time when your clextra is deployed for you. That is set to anything between 0 to 7. I've explained the default. Stay with the default unless you know what you're doing. But otherwise, if it's any other country, any other location on any state or city, and the industry or application, we would suggest a default. And once that default is established, then the 13 characters break down the way you've seen it. So that explains the 13 character store code, as we call it. So please go over this, halt the video to see what I have done and explain that to you. Make sure you stick with this going forward.